I always imagined that when my daughter got married I'd be there, sitting in the front row, tears in my eyes, watching her walk down the aisle in white. I pictured myself holding her bouquet for a moment, fixing her veil, whispering asterisk, "You look perfect, sweetheart." Asterisk. But life has a cruel way of turning dreams into heartbreak. It all began with an email. Not a letter, not a phone call, just an email. Short, cold, almost mocking. The subject line read, "If you want to be part of the big day." I remember staring at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single line. "If you want to be part of the wedding, you can watch it through Google Earth. LOL. No date. No time. No invitation. Just that one sentence and a LOL, like a knife twisting in my chest. It was from her. My daughter, my only child. The girl I raised on my own after her father left. The same girl I worked 2 jobs for, skipped dinners for, and spent nights praying over when she was sick. And now she was telling me to watch her wedding through a satellite window. I reread it again and again, hoping maybe I'd missed something, a hidden joke. A second email explaining it was all a misunderstanding. But there was nothing. Just that one cruel message, cold and final. I didn't cry immediately. No, at first I just sat there frozen, my hands trembling over the keyboard. My mind raced through every memory, every conversation we'd had in the last year. We'd had small disagreements, sure, but nothing that could justify this. I thought we were healing, reconnecting even. But apparently I was wrong. I remember replying just one line. That was it. No anger. No begging. Just silence. Because sometimes silence hurts more than screaming. The next morning I woke up to 12 missed calls. All from her. I didn't pick up. Not once. I watched my phone buzz and vibrate on the table until it finally went quiet. Then came the messages, "Mom, please pick up. It's not what you think, I need to explain." Explain what? That I wasn't worth a seat at my own daughter's wedding? That morning I made a decision. I wasn't going to chase explanations anymore. I'd spent my entire life giving her everything. My money, my love, my time. I even helped pay for that wedding, without knowing I'd never be invited to it. I had transferred money months ago when she said she needed extra funds for the venue. I didn't ask questions. I trusted her. And now she'd used that same money to shut me out of the most important day of her life. I remember walking into the kitchen and making myself a cup of tea, my hands still shaking. Outside it was raining, soft, steady, relentless. It felt like the universe was crying for me. I sat by the window and whispered to myself, maybe this is how it ends. Maybe I just let her go. But the thing about pain is, it doesn't just fade away. It transforms. Slowly, quietly, it starts turning into something else. Something stronger. I didn't know it then, but that email wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my revenge. Not the loud, vengeful kind you see in movies, no. Mine would be quiet. Calculated. The kind that makes people question their choices when realize what she'd thrown away. And when that day came, I'd be ready. That night as I watched her wedding highlights appear on social media. Glittering smiles, champagne glasses, perfect photos, I didn't cry. I simply took a deep breath, turned off my phone and whispered asterisk, "Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetheart. The lesson's coming." Asterisk. I didn't know exactly how or when. But I knew this. I wasn't going to let her treat me like I didn't matter. I had raised a daughter. I had built her future. And now I would rebuild mine without her. That email might have been her goodbye. But for me, it was the start of something far more powerful. The beginning of my comeback. The days after the wedding were strangely quiet. Too quiet. I thought I'd eventually hear from her. An apology, a message, something. But all I got was silence. The same silence that had filled my house ever since she moved out 5 years ago. At first, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. I told myself asterisk, she's happy, that's what counts. Asterisk, but deep down, I knew happiness built on cruelty never lasts. Still, the mother in me couldn't help it. I checked her social media. There she was, smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower, holding hands with her new husband. Captions like "Forever begins here," and asterisk, "Married my best friend in the city of love." Asterisk. And the comments, "You both look perfect. What a dream wedding. Your mom must be so proud." Those last words hit me like a blade. I stared at the screen, my heart tightening. Your mom I spent nights replaying every moment we'd shared, birthdays, her first day at school, The time she got into college, the day I helped her buy her first car. I was always there. Always cheering, always supporting. And now she'd erased me from her story. But then something changed about a week later. I got a call, not from her, but from her husband's aunt, a woman I'd met once before. She sounded hesitant, almost apologetic. I probably shouldn't be calling, she said. But I thought you should know. They're not doing as well as they make it seem. That sentence lit a spark in me. What do you mean? I asked. Apparently, she continued. He lost a big contract a month before the wedding. They covered it up to keep up appearances. I think your daughter helped pay for some of it. I froze. Helped pay? With whose money? That's when it hit me. The money I'd sent her. The venue funds. She hadn't just used it for the wedding. She'd used it to patch up her fiancé's mess. My hard-earned savings had been turned into her husband's lifeline. Something inside me broke that day, but not in a way that made me weak. It broke open a new kind of strength. A colder, quieter kind. I decided I wouldn't confront her right away. I wanted her to live in her illusion for a while, to believe she'd won, that she could erase me and build a perfect life. Because the sweetest revenge isn't quick. It's slow. It's patient. It lets people trap themselves before you ever lift a finger. I started spending time on things I'd put aside for years. My small home bakery business, my social life, even my garden. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't living for someone else. But fate has a way of circling back faster than you expect. One evening, around 2 months after the wedding, my phone rang again. This time it was her. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Her voice was soft, uncertain. Mom, can we talk? I didn't say much, just go ahead. She hesitated before saying, I know I hurt you. I was stupid. But things aren't good right now. We're having some issues. I might need to come stay with you for a bit. Her words should have made me happy. A part of me still loved her no matter what she'd done. But another part, the one she had humiliated, betrayed, and mocked, remembered every word of that email. I stayed silent for a long time. Then I said, Of course you can come, sweetheart. This is still your home. She sounded relieved. Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd understand. But she didn't know that this time, I wasn't the same woman who used to bend over backward to save her. No, this time I had a plan. Because sometimes, to teach someone the value of love, you have to let them feel what it's like to lose it. As I hung up, I looked out the window at the evening sky and whispered to myself, welcome home, darling. Let's see how long it takes before you realize what you've done. I didn't gloat. But for the first time since that cruel email, I felt in control again. And control is the first step toward revenge. The day she came back felt strangely familiar. Like a memory I'd lived before, except this time everything was reversed. When she walked through the door, suitcase in hand, her smile was small and hesitant. She looked tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from life weighing you down. Hi, Mom, she said softly. For a moment I just looked at her. The last time I'd seen that face was on a wedding live stream. Flawless makeup, sparkling eyes, a Parisian backdrop. Now she stood in front of me, no makeup, no glow, just a hint of guilt hiding behind forced confidence. I forced a smile. Welcome home. She let out a shaky breath and stepped inside. Thanks. I didn't know where else to go. I nodded and helped her carry her bags in. The same hands that had raised her, comforted her, paid for her dreams, they still moved instinctively, even after everything she'd done. But deep inside, I wasn't the same mother anymore. Something inside me had hardened, sharpened. I wasn't going to beg for explanations or demand apologies. I'd let her dig her own grave with her own words. We sat down for tea later that evening. She stared into her cup like it held answers she couldn't find. I waited patiently. Finally she spoke. Things aren't good, Mom. Jack lost his job. We're struggling with bills. The apartment's too expensive. He's been distant lately. I sipped my tea. That's unfortunate. She looked at me, her eyes searching for comfort, but I didn't offer it this time. Instead, I asked quietly, So what made you decide to come back? She hesitated, then said, I needed space to think. Maybe stay here for a while. Just until that was her excuse when she first left for college, too. And now, years later, she was still thinking. I smiled politely. Of course, you can stay as long as you need. But in my mind, the clock had already started ticking. Over the next few weeks, I watched her move through the house like a ghost of her old self. She'd wake up late, scroll through her phone for hours, and occasionally cry quietly in her room. I pretended not to notice, though every sob sliced through me. She tried to make small talk, but every conversation felt like a test. "How have you been, Mom?" "Busy," I'd reply. "With what?" "Living." The more distance I showed, the more uneasy she became. It was subtle, the shift of power. 4 years she'd been the one deciding when to call, when to visit, when to care. Now she was the one waiting for me. One morning she came into the kitchen holding her phone. "Mom, can I borrow some money?" "Just until next week. I'll pay you back." I looked at her calmly. "Like the money for the wedding?" Her face went pale. "Mom, please don't bring that up." "Why not?" I said quietly. "You brought it up the day you told me to watch your wedding on Google Earth." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "I was stupid, okay? I thought you wouldn't want to come." "Don't lie to me," I interrupted gently. "You didn't want me there because you were embarrassed. You thought I wasn't enough for that fancy Paris wedding, didn't you?" She didn't answer. Just looked down, shame written all over her face. "I'll think about the money." And that was the first crack in her pride. Days passed. She started helping around the house, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of necessity. But slowly she began to understand something she hadn't before. Respect is earned, not owed. One evening she found me working on my laptop. "You're still running your bakery?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," I replied. "Business has been good. I got a few catering contracts recently." She blinked. "That's amazing. I didn't know you were doing that well." I smiled faintly. "You didn't ask." That silence that followed, it was golden. Because she was realizing, piece by piece, that the woman she once looked down upon had built a life stronger than she ever imagined. And I wasn't done yet. Because the sweetest revenge isn't to see someone suffer. It's to make them see how easily you thrived without them. That night, as she slept under the same roof she once abandoned, I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning. Let her see what real strength looks like." And for the first time in years I felt peaceful. Because my comeback had already begun. And she didn't even know it yet. It's funny how quickly the tables can turn. A month ago, she walked into my house acting like a guest. Now she was careful, polite, quiet, even humbled. I could see the guilt settling on her shoulders heavier with every passing day. She'd begun asking about my life, really asking, not just out of obligation. "Mom, how did you start your bakery again? You used to say you didn't have time." I smiled. "Time appears when people disappear. Funny how that works." She nodded slowly, and I could tell she understood what I meant. There was a certain satisfaction in watching her see me differently, not as the mother she could take for granted, but as a woman who had rebuilt herself. No, I wanted her realization to grow naturally. The quieter the guilt, the deeper it sinks. One afternoon, I was catering for a local event, a charity gala downtown. I was short one pair of hands and she offered to help. First I hesitated, but then I thought, why not? Maybe it was time she saw what strength actually looked like, not designer clothes or Paris photos, but real, honest hard work. When we arrived, people greeted me warmly. "Oh, you're Mrs. Thompson. We loved your lemon tarts last year." She looked surprised. "They know you." "Of course," I said, smiling. "I've been catering for them for 3 years now." She followed me around, helping serve trays, refilling glasses, listening as people praised the food. And for the first time I saw something new in her eyes, admiration. Later that night as we packed up, she said quietly, "Mom, I never realized you've done all this on your own." I wiped my hands on a towel and said softly, "I had no choice, sweetheart. You stopped needing me. So I learned to need myself." She didn't say a word. Just stood there, eyes wet, pretending to tie her hair while trying to hide her tears. In the days that followed, she began changing. She started waking up early, cooking breakfast before I did. She helped me organize my orders, manage emails, even decorate the bakery's website. It was as if she was trying to make up for lost years in silence. I didn't stop her. I let her try because sometimes redemption needs room to breathe. Then one evening while we were having dinner, she said something that caught me off guard. "Mom," Jack called. He wants to come visit. I froze for a moment. Visit here. She nodded. Yes. He said he's sorry for everything that happened. He wants to talk. I could hear the conflict in her voice, hope and fear tangled together. I simply said, "But deep down, if that's what you want, knew how that conversation would go." Jack arrived 2 days later. Same confident smile, same charming tone, but I saw through it instantly. He was one of those men who smiled wide when they needed something. He shook my hand and said, "Mrs. Thompson, it's good to see you again." "Is it?" I replied politely. He laughed awkwardly and sat down with my daughter. They talked for hours, whispers and sighs filling the living room. I stayed in the kitchen listening. At one point his voice rose, frustration breaking through his charm. "You left me when things got hard. You made me look weak." And hers followed, trembling. "I supported you when no one else did. I gave you everything. Even money that wasn't mine." The moment those words left her mouth, silence filled the house. He hadn't known about that she'd used my money to bail him out. His face changed instantly. I heard him mutter, "So your mother funded our wedding?" Then came the sound of a chair scraping back. The door slammed. He left without another word. My daughter sat there sobbing. I didn't go to her right away. I waited just long enough for the weight of truth to settle in. Then I walked over quietly, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said softly, "Sometimes the people we sacrifice everything for are the ones who teach us what love isn't." She buried her face in her hands. "I don't deserve you, Mom. I don't deserve this home." I looked at her, the girl I once held in my arms, the same girl who once told me to watch her wedding through a computer screen, and I whispered, "Then earn it back." Not with words. I watched her cry herself to sleep. And though it broke my heart, I knew it was necessary. Because pain, when it's real, becomes the seed of growth. And in that quiet house, between her regret and my silence, something began to heal. Not perfectly, but honestly. Because now, she wasn't the one teaching me lessons. I was teaching her, without a single word of revenge spoken aloud. But deep down I knew this wasn't the end. The world had a funny way of completing circles. And soon both she and everyone else who doubted me would see how far I'd come. The weeks that followed were quiet but strangely peaceful. My daughter stayed, not as a guest but as a helper, humbled, grounded, and finally aware of the world beyond herself. She didn't talk much about Jack after that night. I could tell the wound was deep, but she was finally learning that heartbreak can either destroy you or rebuild you. And as for me, I was finally rebuilding too, not from pain but from purpose. My bakery had started to flourish. Word of mouth had spread beyond our little town. Orders came in from neighboring cities, and a local food magazine reached out for an interview. I almost laughed when I read the email. Years ago, I was the invisible woman behind everyone else's dreams. Now, people wanted to hear my story. When the journalist arrived, I was nervous, not because of the attention, but because of who was standing beside me. My daughter. She insisted on helping with the setup, arranging pastries, and serving tea. The reporter smiled at her. "You must be proud of your mother. Her comeback story is inspiring." My daughter looked down, eyes glistening. The interview went more than proud. They loved my journey, the struggles, the resilience, the message of starting over at any age. When the article was published, the headline read, "From Rejected to Resilient, the Single Mother Who Built an Empire from Heartbreak." It went viral in a week. Orders doubled. A local TV network called, asking if I'd appear on a morning show segment about women who rise again. I said yes. The morning of the interview, I dressed carefully. Nothing fancy, just simple elegance. My daughter insisted on driving me there. On the way, she said quietly, "Mom, you're amazing. I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you weren't." I smiled. "You were young, blind to what mattered. Now you see. That's all that counts." She nodded, biting her lip, holding back tears. At the studio, lights flashed, people buzzed around, and I suddenly felt like I was in another world. The host greeted me warmly and began asking about my journey. The betrayal, the loneliness, the rebuilding. I spoke honestly from the heart. Sometimes life breaks you so completely that you think it's over. But the truth is, those cracks let the light in. I stopped waiting for an apology and started building a life worth living. The audience clapped. I could feel tears sting my eyes. After the segment aired, messages poured in. Women from everywhere sharing their own stories of being abandoned, forgotten, underestimated. They called me an inspiration. It was overwhelming and healing. And through it all, my daughter watched. Quietly, proudly, painfully. A week later, she came into the kitchen holding her phone. "Mom," she said softly, "Jack saw the interview. I just waited. He said he's proud of you. That he finally understands what kind of woman raised me." I smiled faintly. "And what did you say?" She sighed. "I told him it's too late to understand now." That was the moment I saw it, the shift. My little girl, once blinded by pride and appearances, was finally standing on her own feet, seeing truth without filters. And I knew then my revenge was complete. Because revenge isn't always loud or cruel. Sometimes it's quiet. It's success. It's peace. It's becoming everything they thought you couldn't be, and watching them realize it too late. A few weeks later, the Food Network offered me a spot in a televised competition. A baking show featuring rising entrepreneurs. It felt surreal. The kind of opportunity I'd only dreamed about. When I told my daughter, she hugged me tight. "You're going to win, Mom." I chuckled. "Winning isn't the goal, sweetheart. Showing the world what strength looks like, that's enough." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You already have." That night, after she went to bed, I stood by the window, the same window where months ago I'd sat heartbroken, reading that cruel email. The same spot where my story began. Except this time I wasn't broken. I was alive, whole, unapologetically myself. And for the first time in years I whispered, "Thank you, life, for breaking me, so I could rebuild better." Because my comeback wasn't just about proving her wrong. It was about proving myself right. That even the most shattered heart can rise again. And somewhere out there, maybe Jack, maybe the friends who mocked me, maybe even the people who pitied me, they all saw me now. Not as the mother who got left out, but as the woman who rose higher than any of them expected. That was my justice.
Beautiful.
The baking show aired on a bright Sunday morning. I sat on stage among 8 other contestants, lights shining, cameras rolling. I wasn't nervous, I was grateful. Every burn, every heartbreak, every sleepless night had led me to that very moment. And in the audience, sitting right in the front row, was my daughter, smiling through tears. As the host introduced me, he said, "Our next contestant has one of the most inspiring stories we've heard. She turned her pain into purpose and built a new life from scratch. Please welcome Margaret Thompson." The applause was thunderous. I caught my daughter's eye and she mouthed, "I love you." It wasn't a competition anymore. It was a victory lap for every mother who'd ever been forgotten, every woman who'd ever been underestimated. When the cameras turned off that night, I didn't win first place, I came in second. But that didn't matter. Because when the judges announced my name, I heard my daughter cheering louder than anyone else. Afterward, she ran backstage and hugged me so tightly it took my breath away. "You did it, Mom. You really did it." I laughed through tears. "No, sweetheart. We did. You finally saw me for who I am. That's the real win." For the first time in years I felt complete. Not because of trophies or applause, but because I finally had her back. Not as a dependent daughter, but as a woman who respected me. A few weeks later, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The bakery was busier than ever. I hired new staff, expanded the menu, and even opened a small cafe section. Customers came not just for pastries but for my story, the one that reminded them they could rise again too. My daughter started helping full-time. She handled marketing, social media, deliveries, things I barely understood but she did with ease. It was as if we'd found the perfect balance. Two generations finally walking up for the day, she said quietly, "Mom, do you ever think about the wedding?" I paused. "Not really." "Why?" She looked down, guilt shadowing her face. "Because I do. Every day. I can't believe I left you out of something so important. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that." I walked over, took her hand and said softly, "You already did. Every time you show up, every time you choose to stay, that's forgiveness." She smiled through tears. "You're too kind." "No," I said gently. "I just learned that holding on to anger keeps you stuck in the past. And I've got too much life left to live." Months later, an invitation arrived in the mail, a handwritten one this time. It was from my daughter. Inside it read, Asterisk mom, you miss one wedding. But I want you to be the first to know about the next one. It's a small ceremony, nothing fancy. Just family, just love. And this time you'll walk me down the aisle. Asterisk. I stared at the words for a long time. My heart swelled. Not with revenge but with peace. She had learned. Life had taught her. And maybe I had too. When the day finally came, it was nothing like Paris. No grand venue, no designer gowns. Just a small garden, sunlight streaming through the trees, and the sound of laughter. As I walked her down the aisle, she leaned close and whispered, "You were right, Mom. The best things in life aren't the ones that look perfect. They're the ones that feel real." Tears filled my eyes. "I'm just glad you finally see it." That night, as the guests left and the candles burned low, she hugged me one last time. "Thank you for not giving up on me.
Smiled and said,
Even when I didn't. You taught me
deserve
something
it."
too. That sometimes the best revenge isn't to fight back. It's to rise so high that forgiveness becomes your crown. She laughed softly. "You really are unstoppable, Mom." I looked up at the stars and whispered, asterisk, I had to be. Asterisk. Now, when people ask about my story, I don't tell them about betrayal or heartbreak. I tell them about rebirth. About how one cruel email turned into the greatest lesson of my life. That strength isn't loud, revenge isn't cruel, and love, when it's real, always finds its way back. Because life has a funny way of coming full circle. And sometimes the very people who once shut you out become the ones who open the doors for your greatest victory. That right there was my true revenge. Not anger. Not pride. But peace. The kind of peace that makes even the deepest wounds finally heal.